Thank you for viewing this recording of a free event provided by Next Village San Francisco for our community. Next Village San Francisco is a local nonprofit providing services and support that empower seniors to live independently in their own homes. We welcome people who want to keep connected with their community as members, volunteers, and supporters. We host 30 to 40 free activities and events each month for the public, and our members have access to our network of volunteers. Learn more and get involved at nextvillagesf.org. We hope you enjoy this video.
It's our pleasure, despite the power outage, to welcome you and present San Francisco's historic movie theaters, architectural gems, and cultural icons. And although our theater tour will be chronological, I did want to begin with this absolutely classic image of the Fox Theater. It was at 1350 Market. And this theater was considered the most striking, lavish theater in San Francisco, if not all of California at one time. So fabulous. The opening day announcement read, "World's finest theater dedicated to California." And we're going to return to the Fox shortly. But first, we're going to share a few words about the four architects whose designs were responsible for over half of the theaters that we will be seeing today. These are the four architects that were responsible for marvelous works and were responsible for more than half of the theaters we were going to talk about today. This is Deanna's narrative right now. Is Deanna available?
Yeah, I am. So let me take it away. And
Yes.
so then we can return to you. So as Catherine said, we're going to visit 23 theaters. And of those 23, these four architects designed 16 of them. And all they are all absolutely stunning. Their talent and impact on San Francisco theater is noteworthy. It remains noteworthy. They are James W. Reed, his brother Merritt J. Reed. These two fellows are to the left. T. Patterson Ross and Timothy Pfluger. The Reed brothers, James and Merritt, were Canadians who eventually moved to the West Coast and became one of the most prominent firms in San Francisco. They created landmarks, among which the Fairmont Hotel, the Geneva Car Barn office building, the Cliff House, and Oakland's Grand Lake Theater. In San Diego, they designed the magnificent Hotel del Coronado, and in San Francisco, they designed the Royal Theater, the New Mission, Coliseum, Balboa, Metro, Alexandria Avenue, and Balboa Theaters. The third from the left, or the last man, no, the third from the left, sorry, is T. Patterson Ross. He was a native of Edinburgh, Scotland, a draftsman, and he came to San Francisco and created in 1907 the Russian Hill Cooperative, the Union League Club. He designed the Shriners Islam Temple at 650 Geary, that is now the Alcazar Theater. Interesting note about Ross is that although he was a Shriner, he declined to have his name on the cornerstone and instead chiseled in Arabic in the marble above the door the following: "Great is Allah and great is the Ross, the architect." His fellow Shriners were not pleased. He went on to design the Red Cross building at the Presidio San Francisco and the Summit Apartments. He had a serious accident that ended his career, but he outlived that accident and eventually would be buried at Forest Lawn, the Forest Lawn Memorial Park, in a small chapel that he designed. So eventually he got his chapel without any inscription. Anyway, your turn, Catherine.
And at the far right, we have my favorite, Timothy Pfluger, who was an architect and interior designer. He actually began his career as a draftsman, never went to college, and specialized in Art Deco and streamlined modern, later in Beaux Arts and Mission Revival. He actually left his mark at the top of the mark. He was responsible. He also was responsible for the patent leather bar at the St. Francis Hotel. He designed the Metropolitan Life Insurance Building, Pacific Telephone Building, the glorious 450 Sutter, the Stock Exchange, Bimbo's, and all the following theaters: Paramount, Castro, Alhambra, Royal, New Mission, Egyptian, Metro, and El Rey. Oh, all right. So, time to settle back with your popcorn in your favorite chair and enjoy some historic movie theaters. I'm beginning with the Victoria. 2961 16th Street opened in 1908. Architects were Matthew O'Brien and Carl Werner. And the Victoria is San Francisco Landmark 215. Now, it was built in 1908, so it was not originally a movie theater, it was a vaudeville house. And who was it built for? It was called Brown's Opera House. That's a clue. It was built for Edmund Joseph Brown, the grandfather of the former governor, Jerry Brown. This theater went through a number of transitions, the decline of vaudeville, the Depression, eventually a number of name changes. It was called the 16th Street Theater, and the movies were shown at half price, a nickel. It gave away Depression-era glassware, which was not uncommon in those days. It was at one time in the 1950s, Il Teatro Victoria, which showed Spanish movies. In the 60s, it became the Follies Burlesque. And among the earliest performers were Mae West and Donald O'Connor. These are interior views. This is the lobby, 1943. And according to the landmark report, and the reason it is a landmark is that this theater retains all the original interior design, and it remains largely unaltered. I'm having a little trouble here.
Okay.
Hold on, everyone. We are, there you go.
Just patience, Catherine, and just wanted to let everyone know I've enabled live transcript. You can turn that off. Usually on your ... more, there's a hide transcript or hide subtitles. So if the subtitles are in your way, go ahead and turn those off.
Okay. So an update. PG&E won't be to my house until somewhere between 5 and 8 o'clock. So I guess we'll have a cold dinner. But here goes. Washington Square Theater. It's also known, it has 4 names: Washington Square, Milano, Palace, Pagoda, and then Palace Theater again. 1741 Powell Street, opened 1908. The architects, we don't know. A 1937 fire resulted in a more modern remodel by Alexander Cantin. This Italian variety theater, that is the Washington Square, presented nightly entertainment and flourished in the North Beach community from the turn of the century to 1924. It was located at Powell and Columbus Avenue with its star performer Antonella Pisanelli and was known as the Washington Square Theater. She jam-packed the place too, by the way. It was finally sold to a Jewish company and renamed the Milano Theater and converted to a movie theater in 1928 that showed American films. And over the years, the name of the theater changed. It becomes the Palace in the late 1930s, a neighborhood entertainment center that gave away dishes and other household items. And my grandmother won a silver fruit bowl, which she treasured. She treasured because she had come from Italy with no house goods. At one point, the palace remained empty for several years until 1967, when a Chinese movie theater opened showing Chinese movies and live opera. At that time, it became the Pagoda Palace. It offered, in quotes, midnight shows that started at 12:30 a.m. and ran until 2:30 a.m. It presented nocturnal dream shows with drag performers who were popular with both straight and gay audiences. And until late, that is 1985, the Pagoda showed Chinese films and until the Renaissance Rialto chain took over, and the name goes back to the palace again, showing the Maltese Falcon and Dark Passage. Regretfully, poor attendance ended the repertory operation, and it reverted back to its previous name, the Pagoda Palace. I grew up in North Beach, and the old palace was always there, and from time to time was able to go to the movies, but that ended. Anyway, interior photos of the Milano Theater in 1937 are pictured there. The Milano was altered numerous times over the years and made quite unrecognizable, so it changed. It was vacant for 20 years until the structure was leveled for the construction of the Central Subway Tunnel in 2013. Your turn, Catherine.
Well, although the Gary Theater is never was a movie theater, I did want to give a quick nod. We did want to give a quick nod to the Gary, 415 Gary between Mason and Taylor, opened in 1910. The architects were quite famous, Walter Bliss and William Faville. And the Gary is both a National Register landmark and San Francisco Landmark 82. Again, it opened in 1910 as the Columbia Theater with none other than Sarah Bernhardt and one of my favorites, Isadora Duncan. It hosted Edward G. Robinson, Basil Rathbone, Frederick March, Ethel Barrymore. It was pretty badly damaged in the 06 fire and earthquake, but it was rebuilt. Gorgeous. Here's the interior. These are 1975 interior views. We can see the 3-level seating at the right, and look at that ceiling. Again, not a movie palace, but a palace. Deanna.
Royal Theater, 1529 Polk Street, opened 1916, and the architects and original design were by the Reed brothers, the Canadians. Timothy Pfluger would do a remodel, and then a Vincent Rainey designed the entrance renovations in 1948. The photos left 1943 and right 2013. It was built in 1916, designed, as I said, by the Reed brothers, and in the 1930s was remodeled by Timothy Pfluger for the Nasser brothers, who owned it. And the Nasser brothers and the Sayufi family have owned a number of theaters in San Francisco, if their names are familiar to you. The Nassers, along with the Alhambra and the Castro, included the Royal. There was some controversy about the original architectural firm being that Bernard Joseph had the entrance on California Street, not on Polk Street. And this could have been done to some sort of a suspicious dynamite blast. We don't know. But at the time, its vertical sign was a local landmark, and the facade and organ grills were considered elegant. New management took it over in 1960s, attempting to improve the unsavory ambiance of the neighborhood, because Polk Street was going downhill then, and the transient folks who walked up and down. But the Royal did not regain its former popularity. In June of 2003, the Royal's interior was demolished, lending to apartments, which now exists, although the facade and the architectural points were retained but the signage was removed. So the sign is down. There are interior views of the Royal illustrating the glorious work of Timothy Pfluger. who, as we said before, was an architect, but also a noted interior designer. He was a very, very talented man to have done what the buildings that he created and designing their interiors. Anyway, his Art Deco design elements are stunning and elegant and remain. Your turn, Catherine.
Now we're headed towards the new Mission Theater, 3550 Mission Street, which opened in 1916. Again, the Reed brothers' talent can be seen here. It had a remodel with James Rupert Miller and Timothy Pfluger. It is a National Register landmark and San Francisco Landmark 245, as we can see why here. It was built in 1916 and renovated in 1932, as I said. Timothy did this for the Nasser brothers, Timothy Pfluger for the Nasser brothers. That sign became an Art Deco masterpiece, 70-foot marquee sign. We can see it for blocks. For a time, it did show B movies, and in the 60s and 70s, it actually focused on children's films. It closed in 1993 to become a furniture store. And at that point, actually, you can see the sign at the right. It says Evermax Home Furnishings. Yippee. Well, about that time, City College wanted to tear it down to put a campus facility there, but luckily that did not happen. It has now been renovated and is currently the Alamo Drafthouse Cinema. Here's the interior. Gorgeous, elegant. These are 1943 images. This is more of Pfluger's work, a different type of work. So there we have it.
Okay, well, on to the Alhambra Theater at 650 Geary Street, opened in 1917. The architect Ross, and the Alcazar has landmark status 195. The original Alcazar opened in 1880, but was destroyed by the 1906 earthquake and fire. So it has some historical interest. It was relocated to its present location and rebuilt as a Shriner's Temple. The intention was to reflect an exotic revival style similar to an Islamic temple. This was an adaptation from the historic Alhambra, the palace of the Moorish kings of Granada, Spain, as the highest mark of Arabian art and civilization. Just think of all the fantasy that went into all of this, and then presented movies with more fantasy. The architect, again, Patterson Ross, it has Byzantine arches, filigree lattice work with ornate terracotta, and a granite water table composed the facade. The original Alcazar was closed and was demolished in 1961. This former temple on Geary became a legitimate theater and part of the entire theater district of San Francisco. So it sits on some interesting laurels. Your turn, Catherine.
We're going to the Coliseum Theater. 745 Clement, opened in 1918. My favorite architects, the Reed brothers, did the original design, and the 1932 remodel was by S. Charles Lee. Now, the photo on the left is 1922, and on the right is 1954. So the Reed brothers decided to use a Greek revival motif for this one. It opened in November 1918 with Mary Pickford starring in the movie Johanna Enlists. The theater also had a Robert Morton organ, which was quite popular. And believe it or not, it could seat 2,000 people. The remodel was done in Art Deco. As time went on, it did show second run films, but it did have Jaws at this theater exclusively for a while, and it was extremely popular, and Jaws ran here for 6 months. But you know, San Francisco and the earthquakes in the 89, the earthquake hit 41 minutes before the showing of, believe it or not, Field of Dreams. And the damage to the Coliseum in the 89 happened to be quite massive. It was boarded up, never to reopen as a theater. This is the stunning interior as it looked in April 1931. I'm going to pause here for a moment so you can look at the detail. Glorious detail. I mean, imagine watching your favorite movie stars on your favorite film in something like this. Wow. So the theater closed. This is gone. And now we have a Walgreens with condos above.
My husband and I used to go to that theater when we were younger. Anyway, Golden Gate Theater, 1 Taylor Street, opened 1922. The architect, somebody different now, G. Albert Lansbury. And the Golden Gate is included in the Market Street Theater and Loft District. So this is important for the Golden Gate, the Alcazar, and the other theaters. Let's see, it has National Registered Landmark, and the number is exponential accumulation of numbers. The Golden Gate opened in 1922 with over 2,000 seats, first as a vaudeville house and then as a movie theater with a huge cinematic screen with films directed to Black audiences. But in the meanwhile, it attracted stars such as the Andrews Sisters, Roy Rogers, Judy Garland, and Frank Sinatra. In the 1960s, it became 2 theaters, and until it was closed in 1972. A number of the theaters that Catherine and I researched also had to split their auditoriums into 2 theaters. But before the Golden Gate closed, touring companies presented shows such as Fiddler on the Roof, Hairspray, and others. The interior views of the Golden Gate are pictured, and these were 1922 photos. The National Register Landmark District reports highlights of interior elements of a diagonal string of round-bellied balcony windows. The octagon outer lobby was originally open to the street, is now enclosed by a row of doors. There's fluted columns and a what's called a complete fan vault. A marble staircase leads to the auditorium. The stage is 50 by 120 feet, and there is a very heavy Arab Spanish design. The ceiling, a gently domed original, is lit in soft blues. And then after being divided into 3 theaters, the Golden Gate was restored as a musical theater and a performance venue. Okay, on to the Granada.
Granada Paramount Theater. Okay, this is at 1066 Market. It opened in 1921, and the architect here was Alfred Henry Jacobs. This is a massive project, quite the project. So on the left is a 1921 image, on the right is 1927. And it opened in November 1921 with Marion Davies. Wow, going back a ways. In the movie Enchantment, it had a 1932 remodel, and then it was renamed the Paramount. So it went from the Granada to the Paramount. It was officially described in a publication as a luxurious, opulent movie palace that was part of the Fox West Coast chain. So the Fox Theater chain was prominent all along California, but mostly in Los Angeles and San Francisco. Fox took over 1937 to 1947. It had the largest theater organ, supposedly, and was played by one Oliver Wallace. It had the first stage theater elevator, which is quite the thing. In 1965, the theater closed with the films Happy Girl, starring Elvis Presley, and Nancy Sinatra in Get Yourself a College Girl, which sounds a little bit risque. So here's the interior, the Granada Paramount. This is after the 1930 remodel. Look at that splendor. There was a very interesting article in the October 1922 issue of Architectural Forum. It is downloadable. It's quite the read, and it describes the interior in this way. The treatment of a theater seems to demand a gorgeousness which belongs to the world of stage land, to present the appearance of gaiety and festivity which should be present in a theater, perhaps more than in any other place of public amusement. And it certainly did that until 1965, when it was demolished and replaced with the two-story retail building.
Okay, well, on to Lowe's Warfield, otherwise Warfield Theater at 982 Market Street. It opened in 1922. Again, the architect was Landsberg, and you have the photos there taken in 1922. The theater opened in May, and it was built by Marcus Lowe in honor of his friend David Warfield, a native San Franciscan who had begun as an usher, becoming a great silent film actor. The Warfield was the first vaudeville and movie palace and one of Lowe's theater chains. Ornate with marble chandeliers, a painted mural of matadors and senoritas floated above the arch. Big name entertainers included Al Jolson, Louis Armstrong, and Charlie Chaplin, and a dog show with the likes of Rin Tin Tin. Bob Dylan played a 2-week run with his gospel tour in 1979 and again in 1980. He was followed by the Grateful Dead and U2, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and then a Cantonese opera from China. My goodness, cultural shock to go between all these films. The Jerry Garcia Band was the first house band. The Warfield is operated by Golden Voice, a division of AEG Live, featuring live contemporary musical performances. And the theater had an appeal as a rock concert venue because it has more intimacy and better sound than than an arena. The theater seats 2,500. Next slide, we see the interior views of the Warfield Theater. Marcus Lowe commissioned the San Francisco architect again, Landsberg, to design the Warfield at about the same time he also did its neighbor, the Golden Gate Theaters. So movies were pretty prevalent to have all this attention by all these outstanding architects and interior designers. On to the Balboa, Catherine.
So the Balboa, interestingly, I was not able to find any early photographs, being that it was opened in 1926. The earliest photograph I was able to find was 1964 at the left and a 1972, not good quality, at the right. The theater opened in February 1926. It sat 800. Wow. It was designed by the Reed brothers, who built it for Samuel Levin. Now, this is an interesting point here because Levin made quite an interesting statement. He said that he embraced neighborhood philosophy of offering quality entertainment in a comfortable setting close to where people lived. So that is part of the reason we have so many neighborhood theaters. Certainly we have the major theaters on Market Street, but we all remember our neighborhood theaters. Unfortunately, the Balboa had quite the fire. It was remodeled. It eventually, by the year 2000, it just showed second run films, but at reasonable prices. The Sound of Music ran for many weeks. It was a neighborhood family theater. Eventually, as many are, it was divided into 2 sections. It came under new management and now is under the care of the San Francisco Neighborhood Theater Foundation, which I can speak more about later. quite interesting. The Castro.
The Castro, 429 Castro Street, opened 1922, and Timothy Pfluger does it. The photographs are 1927 on the left, 1964 on the right. The Castro is San Francisco's landmark number 100. Timothy Pfluger designed the Castro with the arched central window surrounded by intricate lacework down the sides. It was owned by the Nasser brothers. It presently seats 1,400, was originally located at 479 Castro, and then relocated to 429. It opened in June 1922 with Mayor James Rolfe in attendance and a pre-screening of the film Across the Continental Divide before it opened to the general public the following day. There was a Wurlitzer pipe organ played before films and events, and it too had an enormous signage. Today, the Castro presents movies, films, including film festivals and special entertainments commemorating holiday celebrities. Of late, the Castro presented a documentary movie about Harvey Milk entitled Milk. Organist David Harrigan continues to play the world's largest hybrid organ, and there are but here goes, there's some controversy for the Castro. There are plans to flatten the ground floor for musical groups like rock and roll, and to do away with the extensive seating. So that's something that you should look into the newspaper to see more about what's going on. The interior views of the Castro, left 1927 and right 1943, and designed again during that era of palatial movie theaters. And this actually was Pfluger's first movie theater. It made him famous. He designed the exterior in Spanish Baroque style with the high curvilinear gable, large grilled windows above the marquee, 25-foot high windows dominate the facade. Inside, on each side of the entry foyer, dramatic staircase ascend to the mezzanine and to the balcony. And there's large murals evoked in the Italian Renaissance style. So, Catherine.
Here is the Egyptian Theater, a smaller theater. 1069 Market, opened in 1925. The architect was Timothy Pfluger. It opened as the Guild in March 1925 on Market, and the theaters on Market attracted a lot of walk-by traffic. So actually, when the neighborhood goes in a decline, there goes the theater. But it did show first-run movies after World War II, The Great Waltz, Gone with the Wind. But again, the clientele on Market changed, the environment changed, and eventually it showed low-price action films for 50 cents. And next door to it was the Pussycat Theater. So the Guild copied those films. And it finally did close in December 1987. Moving to the Metro, Deanna.
Oh, there was a note. I don't know if.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you want to do it or?
Oh, okay. Deanna did provide us with a very interesting point on the Egyptian, quite fun note. The theater presented the film The Last Man on Earth, which is a post-apocalyptic science fiction horror movie, if that's a mouthful, in which the vampires were repelled by nothing other than garlic. And here's the interesting point, garlic, right? The film was made in Rome. Thank you, Deanna, for that.
Welcome. I love that one.
Okay.
Anyway, the Metro at 255 Union, opened 1924. The architects were the Reed brothers, with remodels in the 30s by Timothy Pfluger and 41 by Alexandria Canton. The photos left 1963, right? Oh, sorry.
They're both 1963.
Are they? All right, you're the authority. The Metro Theater is San Francisco's landmark 261. It was built in 1924 and designed by the Reed brothers, as we said, in a Spanish colonial revival style, and it has a tiered layout. It was remodeled in 1941 to an Art Deco style, and it reflected simplicity with the marquee replaced, and the interior was retained. New murals filled the side walls of the auditorium with fairy-like figures, very light designs above treetops. It is assumed that under the direction of Pfluger, another architect, designer, Otto Detschmann, worked on the renovation. Controversy tore at attempts to renovate this aged theater, leaving it abandoned for 2 years. The Metro is the original home of the San Francisco International Film Festival, and that really deserves attention. The interior views of the Metro are presented, pictured there as they were seen in 1942. The theater's landmark report states that it was remodeled in 41 and then renovated in 98. Although it was designed by the Reeds in the Spanish colonial, it was also updated to Art Deco, and we already said that. And the interior has undergone dramatic changes with new murals. It's in excellent condition, this is important, and remains the most intact of the Reed Brothers theaters in San Francisco. So on to the Alexandria.
Well, here's a massive structure, the Alexandria Theater at 5400 Geary. It opened in 1923. The architects were the Reed brothers. The photo at the left is 1927. And there's been a bit of a change at the right, which is 1964. This is yet another glorious example of the Reed brothers' work. And I'm going to quote from the November 23rd, 1923 Richmond neighborhood newspaper, the Richmond Banner. As the ancient pharaohs built their temples to the gods, so has the Alexandria been dedicated to the god of amusement. The god of motion picture, before which millions bow down each night throughout the world. That's quite the statement. Oppenheimer and Levin opened the Alexandria in 1923 at a cost, it's only $350,000 in the Egyptian style. And it was one of the leading neighborhood theaters in the Richmond district. In 1941, it was remodeled extensively in the modern style that was the favorite in the 40s. It was upgraded again in the 50s. In 1976, it opened as the Alexandria 3, which means it was cut up into 3 theaters. The former balcony and loge sections were converted into 2 separate smaller auditoriums and a single auditorium below. But it is said that the original dome, that beautiful famous dome, is still under the renovation. Here's the interior in 1942. This is after the modern style. And the theater actually has been closed since 2004. There is a controversy on what to do with the location, but it seems the latest is that it will be a swim center and housing complex.
Well, the try that one again. The Alhambra Theater, 2330 Polk Street, opened 1926. Architects Miller and Pfluger. The photographs are not dated, and it has historical landmark. Miss Polk Street was the Alhambra Theater in its Moorish revival style, with its north tower erected above the theater, beckoning the viewers to come. Opened in November 1926, it was designed by Miller and by these 2 architects with 1,625 seats at a cost of $500,000. So it was more expensive, I have to say, than the Alexandria. But anyway, it came with a Wurlitzer. In 1967, the theater, again, more division, was divided into 2 sections and then reopened in 1988 as a single screen. But then 10 years later, it was closed and taken over as a sports gym and currently is Crunch Fitness Gym with an upstairs yoga studio. The marquee remains. And the interior of the Alhambra, as you can see, is sometime in 1926. One of the reasons the Alhambra has garnered landmark status is that the interior changes made in the 1950s and in 1974 were reversed in 1988. So all these changes happen, neighborhood changes, economy changes. In the 1950s, a cinescope screen replaced the original Alhambra screen and concealed the massive arch. In 1974, the auditorium was divided in half with a cinder block wall and painted plasterboard suspended from the ceiling. These were reversed at another time, and the theater's elaborate interior was carefully restored. Anyway, your turn, Catherine.
The Orpheum. Who hasn't been to the Orpheum? 1192 Market. The architect was Marcus Priteca. The photograph at the left is 1926, and the one on the right was not dated. This is San Francisco Landmark 94. Well, it opened, oops. Now, let's see here. What has happened? Oh, well, here we go.
There you go.
I've got it. Yes. Opened in 1926. This is the Pantages Orpheum. The landmark report describes the theater as, well, quote, possessing the most impressive theater facade surviving on Market Street. Wow. The Pantages Orpheum was a far cry from the classical mode of Priteca's earlier work. In this case, he turned into the what is called the Spanish Gothic mode. Wow, interesting. And until the opening of the Art Deco Hollywood location, Pantages, this was the largest and most exciting of the circuit's theaters and is generally regarded as one of the architect's most significant works. Quite stunning.
Okay, the Avenue Theater going on. 2650 San Bruno Avenue, opened 1927. The Reed brothers created it. The photos, 1927 on the left, and on the right, 1940. The Avenue Theater opened in July in the Portola district and was built and operated by the Levin brothers. It ran promotions wherein patrons could collect dinnerware one piece at a time. This was, we've already seen this in several theaters where people collected, a whole dinner set. You went to the movies to get each, a salad plate or a dinner plate or whatever was offered, and other household items from. Were also offered. In 1966, the Lyric Photoplay Film Festival or Society, the new owners installed a Wurlitzer that was previously in the State Lake Theater in Chicago. So it travels cross country. And in 1966, Tom Hazelton was to have opened the new organ with a screening of The Lost World. The theater presented foreign films, 3D films, and silent ones with the organ as an accompaniment. And so let's take a look at the interior view of the Avenue Theater. The theater's famous organ is there, and it was used eventually in the 60s by the American Theater Organ Society at its national conventions. Before the organ, however, was replaced and put in storage with the closure of the Avenue Theater in the mid 1984, Jim Riggs recorded Top Hat on it. James Garland. Riggs is an American saxophonist, big band director, and musical educator. Now we go on to the El Capitan.
Yes, the El Capitan.
2353 Mission Street, opened in 28. The architects, Krim and Lensberg. And we see photos from 1933. And the El Capitan has San Francisco landmark status. The theater, El Capitan, was otherwise called the Cap by their neighborhood and was built and designed, as we said, by Landsberg. It was the second biggest theater in San Francisco, with this time a Mexican facade, Spanish colonial revival auditorium seating 3,000. It was reported that the marquee flashed in beautiful colors as the sign spelled out the name letter by letter. Dan McLean was the manager, and he was a celebrity of himself. He would dress in a tuxedo, top hat, and handlebar mustache, greeted all who entered. Viewers remembered the beautiful curtains on the stage that parted in the middle with another behind it that went straight up. And when the movie started with the screen flashing, it flashed "Coming soon to your El Capitan." Then the movie started. The interior views of the Cap are pictured there. The long lost interior is there. And let's see, it was, as we said, was the second largest movie theater in town, but it was demolished in 1961. The rest of the building, shops, a rooming house, and the old marquee are still there. But ever since it's, let's say, renovation here, motorists can now drive through what was once the lobby entrance, or the 3,000 to the 3,000 seat theater. Today it's a parking lot, and the landmark now is gone, but one could drive themselves into the parking lot, and my goodness, how beauty fades and another era begins. The Fox, Catherine.
All right, we have arrived. This is my favorite. 1350 Market opened in 1929, and the architects were Thomas Lamb and H.A. Minton. Photo at the left is 1929, right is 1930. There she is. It was built in 1929 by William Fox to show movies produced by the Fox Film Corporation. It opened in June with the Charlie Chan movie, of course, Behind That Curtain, starring Warner Baxter and Lois Moran. The cost of construction, this was the biggie, $5 million. It had a vast auditorium decorated in gold and ivory shades. It had chandeliers, serious chandeliers that we will see. It had 25,000 square yards of carpet in maroon and gold. It was considered one of the artistic triumphs of theater construction. It had a spacious foyer, smoking rooms for men and women, elevators, and at times it was compared to the Paris Opera House. Wow. On opening day, the heads of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Universal Studios, it was quite the gala. They were accompanied by stars, including Werner Baxter. Sadly, 1932 to 1933, the theater had to close down due to financial difficulties. But after World War II, there was a bit of a revival. Now, I did want to include this fabulous article. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle of June 28, 1929. This is downloadable. It is a full page with photographs and drawings. Absolutely stunning article that you can download. And it describes the theater in this way. Sumptuously appointed playhouse described as the most beautiful in the world, San Francisco and California will hold the attention of the theatrical world tonight. This was opening night, when the new $5 million Fox Theater will be formally opened and dedicated. It was named for William Fox, a genius of the theatrical world. This palatial show palace stands as a steel and concrete monument. Sadly, not anymore. I did want to offer more than a few photos. This is the interior. Fox Theater. This is what the audience, the moviegoers would see as they entered. Absolutely opulent. Another publication that is available online is the December 1929, The Architect and Engineer. Many of you have heard of the Architect and Engineer publication that has a whole section dedicated to the construction, the planning, the building of the Fox Theater. This is available online, and I highly recommend that article, which I can provide if you would like it. More interior shots. Look at the detail here. Wow. The organ it had was the largest in the world at that time. I'm pausing because this is what happened. The Fox Theater closed its brass doors as the showplace of the West on Saturday, and I know it exactly, Saturday, February 16th, 1963. There were 4 farewell events before the curtain fell and the doors closed. The theater had 4,000 seating capacity. People were lined up around the block. Unbelievable. It was a 4-day event called the Farewell to the Fox. And the destruction we're looking at on the left was July 1963. I was there when they demolished the Fox Theater. And I'll never forget that day. And it was my inspiration, actually, to explore San Francisco history. It happened on that day.
All right. Well, congratulations, Catherine, that you're able to date that with wonderful theater. Here goes the El Rey, 1970 Ocean, open 1931. Again, Pfluger is the architect, and the theater has historical landmark. Spanish colonial revival style was very popular in the surrounding neighborhoods of the Ingleside Terraces, Mount Davidson Manor, and the Balboa Terrace at the time of the El Rey's construction. So the theater is going to reflect the neighborhood. A Spanish name, the King, was chosen, and architect Pfluger mixed Spanish elements with the modern style in his design. The theater mogul Samuel Lewin spent $500,000 constructing a 1,830 seat theater, and the El Rey opened November of 1931, featuring Smiling Lieutenant with Maurice Chevalier in the leading role. Decades passed until 1977, when the voice of the Pentecost Church established itself in the El Rey for the next 30 years. In 2015, the church defaulted on a loan, and the El Rey was purchased for development into housing units, retail space, and a garage, much like that former theater. At this point, the redevelopment plans sought to restore the facade and other important elements back to Pfluger's original construction. But these improvements allow the property to be considered for landmark status. And happily, the El Rey now retains its landmark status. So let's take a look at the interior views of the El Rey, 1942. This theater is the only one of Pfluger's San Francisco theaters designed with complete Art Deco. And it's been redeveloped to include, as I said, the housing and retain some of the original facade. Last is the Nob Hill Theater, 950 California Street. And as a youngster, I was fascinated that a hotel, namely the Fairmont, would have a theater in it. I was also fascinated by the fact that the hotel also had a swimming pool, which a lot of you will probably remember turns into none other than the Tonga Room. But here goes. The Nob Hill Theater, we don't know who the architect was, and we don't really have interior photos. But the theater was opened in 1944 with Jennifer in the Song of Bernadette. It was designated as an intimate theater catering to the hotel guests staying at the Fairmont. as well as the neighborhood. Interestingly, the theater used a rear view projection whereby the projectors were behind the screen, were behind it, and the image was cast on the translucent screen from the rear. The Nob Hill Theater operated from the the California Street side of the hotel, built by the 1960s. I'm sorry, let me try this again.
Oh,
And I think Deanna may have accidentally
yes,
hit the wrong button. So Catherine, can you continue?
correct. Oh, yes, I will continue for Deanna. So the Nob Hill Theater operated on the California Street side of the hotel. But by the 1960s, the theater was no longer profitable, as happened in the 60s often, and it was closed in October 1964. And this is where Deanna would have shared her memories, where she saw her first movie, perhaps, The Lady and the Tramp. I remember that one too. So the theater and the adjacent swimming pool that was located in this area of the hotel gave way, as Deanna mentioned, to the Tonga room. And so
Deanna
this
is on the line. Deanna, can you unmute and rejoin?
oh,
Absolutely. Here I am.
okay, Deanna.
Anyway, go ahead.
I just finished your Nob Hill.
No, I heard you summed it up.
You don't want to add?
No, I don't want to add anything. For me, the big event was seeing Lady and the Tramp in a hotel. I thought, my God, that was quite fascinating. Up until that point, I had always gone to the Palace in North Beach, or later on, as a teenager, I went to the Marina Theater on Chestnut Street. So, but to walk into the back entrance of the Fairmont Hotel was quite an event for a youngster. So anyway, go ahead, Catherine, take it away.
So we're at the end of our presentation, and of course, I'm going to close with an image of the Fox Theater. This was taken in 1929. We are facing the grand stairway, obviously. It was a striking view that one could experience when one entered this palatial movie theater to enjoy their favorite actors come alive in the Oscar-winning film. And this is the image I want to close with. This is the one I want to remember. And even though the theater is gone, thankfully, films, both still and motion, have captured and preserved our treasured memories and our treasured theaters. So we could say they are gone, but they certainly aren't forgotten. The end.
Thank you for viewing this Next Village video recording. We hope you enjoyed it. Please help us spread the word and tell friends and neighbors about Next Village events and services for seniors and adults with disabilities in San Francisco. Visit our website to learn more about our vibrant, growing network, as well as to view our calendar of upcoming Zoom and in-person events and activities in San Francisco. Our website is nextvillagesf.org. Contact us to join our email list to learn about events and resources for seniors in San Francisco. And subscribe to the Next Village YouTube channel by clicking the button below.